Good morning, students. So we are here again and we are into discussion of American modern dance. You know, today we will learn about the isms, some of the isms we can trace them in the modern dance of USA. The world of modern dance in the West has many a times tended to follow the different philosophical movements as has been the contemporary trends the then time. Martha Graham, commonly taken as the mother of modern dance, followed modernism in her choreographies. Modernism in art generally is seen as the mission of rejecting the tradition in favor of something new or to create forms for no other reason than innovation. Modernism was an exploration of possibilities and a perpetual search for uniqueness and its cognate individuality. The philosophical movement postmodernism is mostly a result against the philosophical supposition and principles of the modern period of Western history. The period ranged from the 16th and the 17th century to the mid 20th century. Postmodern dance is a 20th century dance concept, a reaction to the compositional and presentation limitation of modern dance. Postmodern dance included the use of everyday movements as suitable to performance art and promoted fresh system of dance composition. Arguing that any movement was dance and any person was a dancer, postmodern dance began as a closer ally to ideology of modernism rather than the architectural, literary and design movements of postmodernism. However, the postmodern dance movement quickly developed to take in the principles of postmodernism, which was seen in the wide variety of dance works emerging from the Judson Dance Theatre, the home of postmodern dance. Spreading from the 1960s to the 70s, the chief driving force behind postmodern dance was rather short-lived, but its heritage continues in contemporary dance, which is often referred to as a blend of modernism and postmodernism, and the growth of postmodernist choreographic processes have produced an extensive array of dances in varied styles. Dancers and choreographers started to believe that they were confined within the teachings of their forerunners in the 1950s. In order to become proficient in their art, most dance performances were painstakingly practicing. This required the dancer to study and to train for several years. As Isadora Duncan had revolted against ballet, this age group of dancers wanted to take their choreography in a dissimilar route than their teachers. As many of their predecessors had been following, these new choreographers were not anxious to pursue the dramatic and the realistic concepts, but they believed that other factors were more significant to include in their dance design. One of these issues, for instance, was to imitate and display movements instead of the storyline as the key center of attention of the dance art. Because of this idea, the works of these choreographers often called an abstract. They were often called as abstract. These people were also commonly referred to as being part of the avant-garde, meaning that they were leaders in a new and unconventional movement, specifically the postmodern movement. Merce Cunningham was the first choreographer to become known from using conventional choreographic processes and develop a fresh approach to choreography. Unlike his forerunners, Cunningham discarded themes or storylines in dance. His perception of dance revolved around the idea of movement for movement's sake. For him, movements should be the main attention in the dance and should not be carried out to tell a story to the audience. Cunningham refers to his show as events, frequently used chance and indeterminacy methods in his choreography. These schemes are apparatus which Cunningham believed assisted him to do away with old habits and create new and exciting moments in his dances. For example, chance methods were used to decide precise movement order, phrase order, dancers' directions, floor patterns on stage, or the order on which the piece of a dance will go in. In 1953, Cunningham created a dance called Suit by Chance. In this, a toss of a coin decided different aspects of spatial designs, timing and order of movement sequences. Indeterminacy, altogether an unusual model. An unusual model is a manner by which the essentials of the dance can modify from performance to performance. In field dances created in 1963, the dancers were allowed to display the movements that they were given beforehand and perform them in diverse manner, such as go over a section again or reversing a section and many such possibilities. Therefore, using indeterminacy methods, a dance which is performed in a sequence one night might not be performed the same way in the next night. Cunningham also collaborated with several revolutionary musicians such as David Tudor, Toshi Ichiyanagi and Gordon Mumma, among others. His most revered collaborations were with the composer John Cage, who apprehended the same idealistic viewpoint as Cunningham and also used chance and indeterminacy methods in his compositions. Contemporary visual artists like Andy Warhol, Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg created set and designed costumes for numerous productions of Cunningham. Alvin Nicolais, another choreographer who rose up against the contemporary methods of choreography, did not feel that the identity of a person had to be the main focus on stage. Dancers in his work were over and over again presented in costumes that made them look more as objects than humans. For example, Nicolais choreographed a dance called Masks, Props and Mobiles in 1953, in which the dancers in one section appeared totally covered in bags made of materials. These bags were controlled by the dancers from inside. The visual effect was completely novel that the dance audiences had ever seen. Nicolais is also famous for integrating dance, music and design. He regularly crafted his own music, costumes, props and lighting designs for his dances. Nicolais' works were primarily abstract and he believed in the motion, not the emotion. In his early days as a choreographer, many dance critics charged him of dehumanizing the dancers in his works. But Nicolais did not distinguish his work in that manner. He considered that he was serving the audience with a vision of a different knowledge, one that was not apprehensive with human thoughts and passion, but with exquisite and strength of movement. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, the works of Cunningham, Nicolais and others inspired another group of choreographers to generate in an unusual way. During the 1960s and 70s, this new group of postmodern dancers extended the existing boundaries and went even further, just as Cunningham and Nicolais had done. Choreographers such as these new postmoderners wanted to condense dance to its simplest appearance and to observe what dance really was as per their notion. Similar to Cunningham and Nicolais, they too eliminated the idea of theme and storyline. They also eliminated the use of formal technique, instead were examining walking, running, skipping and hopping, which were the basic movements of dance. They began to innovate dances based on these ideas. In order to continue with these thoughts, some of the choreographers even refused to work with trained dancers, so many used inexpert dancers in their works. The early development of the Judson Dance Theatre can be mapped from 1960. During the 1960s and 70s, several choreographers and dancers got themselves attached to the Judson Church in New York, where a performance space was created in the church. These dancers became renowned as the Judson Dance Theatre. The dancers were firm to discard the usual teachings of their earlier masters. Judson Dance Theatre may be called as a reaction against a prevailing dance idea and in addition possibly a commentary on the times. Musicians, visual artists, writers as well as dancers united and put forward illustrations which were coined as dance. The idea behind modern dance had now become out of time and the Judson people wanted to articulate an unusual cadence. Gymnasiums, city streets and even rooftops became their performance places. Theatres were not much preferred. These artists based their works mostly on improvisation. Sometimes they also used theatre games and some experimental tools. These performers were regular participants of the organized performance events called happenings. In happenings, participation from audience members in the choreography was a unique feature. This had become popular with avant-garde artists, musicians, writers and dancers. Many of the Judson Dance Theatre members had participated in the happenings and therefore had experiences in spontaneous and collaborative work and looked for different possibility in dance making. One name, a very important name in this was Robert Ellis Dunn. He started to work compositions, he started to take composition classes at the Cunningham studio. These classes had a strong source in creativeness and study of the work of art and were very experimental in nature. In 1962, he organized the first event at the Judson Church. Though Judson Dance Theatre gained popularity and created lot of interest among new generation dancers, but the press and the dance critics ignored this trend initially. But in this due course, we find the comment, the experiments and adventures of the Judson Dance Theatre laid the groundwork for a postmodern aesthetics in dance that explained and often challenged the range of purpose, materials, motivations, structures and styles in dance. The Judson Dance Theatre was closed down in 1968. The members now moved along individually. Many of them grouped with each other. One such group was Grand Union. Some new members were also invited to join in this. The Grand Union was a collaborative effort. There was no particular director and all of the members had equality. Everyone was involved in the artistic process of the choreography. Both dance and theatre were the focus of the company, where some of the themes were political, some of them were comical, some were abstract and some literal. But improvisation was the key to the idea. Sally Baines states that the Grand Union is the material and forma, limits of there and by incorporating objects and gestures from everyday life using imagery including sounds from popular culture and making long rambling works in a flexible format with a consistently changing hern of images and meanings. The Judson Dance Theatre and the Grand Union contributed to the dance world with several important dances that were created during their time. A truly admired dance from this time was choreographed by Judson Dance Theatre member Yoon Rayner. This dance, entitled Trio A, this was produced in 1966. It encased movements that were reduced to its bare fundamentals. There were no dynamic changes of the movements throughout the dance. The dance now had to be technically skilled to perform these movements, though we find some of the movements were rather complex and intricate to carry out. Well, the audience witnessed the dancer trying to portray the movements with much effort. This dance was later also recreated by Rayner for a protest against the Vietnam War. In 1967, she renamed the dance Convalescent Dance. She joined with other choreographers in the protest and performed this. Another Judson Dance Theatre member, Trisha Brown, choreographed MOL Walking Downside of Building in 1970, which was illustrative of its own and was performed in the streets of New York City. People on the street looked on. Brown also created many multifaceted choreographic works by using the act of repetition. Simple movement models were developed and repeated in quite a lot of unusual ways, like changing the direction, level or timing of the movement, turning the simple fundamental motor patterns into visually complicated dances. In addition to these choreographers, there were several others who presented dances that had a tremendous impact on the way we now look at dance. Throughout the 1960s and the 70s, the postmodern choreographers formed works that were a major departure from the work of their forerunners. However, during that same time, there were some choreographers who would not reverse method of execution, subject or storyline, and they were not considered to be postmodern. Hence, we see that their work was not considered to be abstract or avant-garde. Alvin Ailey was one such choreographer and was concerned with making dances that were easy to get to the general public. He wanted these audiences to experience and be thoroughly satisfied and entertained while they were watching his dances. He was anxious first and foremost with creating works that had an explicit form, contrasting the dances of the Judson Dance Theatre and Grand Union. One of the Ailey's most popular dances is Revelation in 1960s and is performed to Negro spirituals. It is an extremely technical dance that contains theatrical as well as humorous moments. Revelations, seen by many as a celebration, portrays the divine legacy of the Afro-American. It is still performed today by the Ailey Company and is considered to be their signature dance. The other trend in modern dance perceived is minimalism. Minimalism is an instrument used to free yourself of life's surplus in support of centering on what's important so that you can find happiness, fulfillment and freedom. The label minimalist is a useful way of bringing awareness to a basic move towards dance composition. In the dance world, the word is used to identify choreographers who put up dances using only a few carefully selected but intricately developed steps. But although all minimalist dances may replicate a concern for structural precision, they need not appear identical. If we consider some of the dances offered at the Joyce Theatre last season by Lucinda Childs, Laura Dean and Elliot Feld, we can understand this standpoint. Dance number 1 by Lucinda Childs was certainly a minimalist piece, for it was nothing but a study in going back and forth. Yet, as performances by the Lucinda Childs Dance Company revealed, it was far from boring. The 8 dancers in the cast crossed the stage in couples, both dancers usually skipping lightly and the one dancer always slightly upstage of the other. The pleasure of watching the piece was that of seeing the ways childs could vary these basic steps. The skips broadened into low jumps. Then the dancers occasionally tilted their bodies. They also changed directions, whereas they sometimes moved from right to left. At other times, they went from left to right, and a couple going in one direction occasionally intersected the path of a couple going the opposite way. Such movements can have an almost ceremonial dignity, a quality Childs has highlighted in her choreography. In her choreography Calyx, we see this. Like many of her works, it qualified thoroughly prearranged skips and hops, but they were performed with such enthusiasm that Calyx looks like a nature ceremony, an idea made stronger by Tadashi Kawamata's flower-like sculptural setting. The season at the Joyce by the Laura Dean dancers and musicians accentuated the ways in which Laura uses space. In Skylight, she treated space as an open field waiting to be claimed. The curtain rose upon an empty stage, then one by one, 6 dancers entered, as if staking out territory for themselves. In contrast, the 6 dancers in Laura's Symphony were already on stage at the start of the piece. At times, however, these dancers appeared to exit in tension with their space, and their repeated sequences of spinning lips and nervous drumming gestures suggested that they were ready to burst loose from their spatial confines. Because they never did, Symphony seemed both orderly and filled with energy. Laura's fondness for spins, lips and drumming gestures made parts of Magnetic resemble a continuation of Symphony. Yet in Magnetic, Laura showed greater concern for clusters of dancers than she did in Symphony. At times, the dancers moved as a single unit, then the unit would break apart only to reassemble in some new formation. One striking episode contrasted a group of dancers leaping vigorously downstage with another group sewing at the back of the stage. Like Lucinda Childs, Laura Dean can contrast marvels out of simple choreographic materials. Perhaps the most surprising choreographer to be included among the minimalists was Mr. Feld, a balletic eclectic. He has worked in a multitude of styles. However, in recent years, he has experimented with minimalism, choreographing strictly patterned works in which dancers interact with objects. In Bent Planes, the choreography explored ways of climbing up and sliding down a set of inclined surfaces. The gathering momentum of the Grand Canyon caused the dancers to rush up the sides of triangular constructions. Similarly, in Medium Rare, a solo, James Sewell also rushed up the sides of a construction and bounded on a small trampoline as well. Although these pieces are well crafted, some dancegoers have found them gimmicky because of their use of special equipments. Mr. Feld, from succumbing to the temptation of rambling choreographically as he has occasionally done in some of his ballets, moreover his interest in minimalism has certainly contributed to the spare power of Skara Brae. The new work offered this past spring by the Fled Ballet that proved to be one of Fled's most interesting creations in the seasons. Although the title refers to the name of a Neolithic settlement in the Orkney Islands and the accompaniment is traditional Irish, Scottish and Breton music, Feld has made no attempt to show with anthropological accuracy how ancient Gaelic people might have danced. His choreography, however, does possess a bluntness that suggests that these dances are the sort people living among stones would perform. No one could confuse the dances of Childs, Dean and Feld. Yet, at least some of their works do show the influence of minimalism. At the same time, the fact that each of these dances is effective in its own particular way suggests that minimalism need not restrict the choreographic imagination.